Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Reverend Matt, I'm the Connectionalist, and we are going to be reacting today to a video from Ready to Harvest, and it's about church splits, and it's about the Church of England and the Methodist split in the late 1700s. Of course, I'm a United Methodist pastor, and so this is of particular interest to me, and I know a lot about this already, but I'm looking to see if there is something new we can all learn together or a new angle that I've never seen before, and so we're going to jump right on it. Let's get going.
The Church of England was separated from the rest of the Catholic Church in 1534, and in 1571, the 39 Articles which define Anglican doctrine were finalized and added to the Book of Common Prayer. But it was not into a spirit of fervent religious practice that John Wesley, born 130 years later in 1703, found himself in, but rather one of infidels and apathy. 9 years before Wesley, Voltaire was born. So
John Wesley, I didn't pause it in time. John Wesley is the founder of the Methodist movement and remained an Anglican priest his entire life. Did not want to start his own denomination. To be very clear, he never wanted to do that. He kind of felt forced to make a drastic action at the end of his life, which I'm sure will be covered in here. If not, I will cover it.
Spread his criticism of religion. And 8 years after Wesley, Hume would follow with his skepticism. But it wasn't just from the outside of the church that John Wesley...
Yeah, I had to read Hume in college because the Enlightenment period, the Age of Reason period, you start to get people like David Hume and these humanists who are starting to say maybe there's not a need for religion, right?
Wesley would see a rejection of that which was holy. The Archbishop of Canterbury in the Church of England, during much of Wesley's ministry, Thomas Secker, spoke of the state of the church in this way. Christianity is ridiculed and railed at with very little reserve, and the teachers of it without any at all.
Christianity is ridiculed and railed at with very little reserve, and the teachers of it without any at all. Yeah, it's a common thing for the church institutionally to blame everything except themselves for their problems, so this is not surprising to me.
At the time Wesley arrived at Oxford University, he found posted in the university a directive prohibiting the reading of the infidels' books and encouraging the reading of Scripture. Even then, Oxford was no friend.
That's not a good idea. You shouldn't just say, well, because this guy's an atheist and arguing against God, we're going to say you can't read his book. That's a super bad idea. That does not work. Censoring books doesn't work.
To an enthusiastic Christian. The Dean of Christ Church, one of the Oxford colleges, refused to post the edict, and when John Wesley, his brother Charles, George Whitefield, and others formed the Holy Club, where they would encourage each other in Christian living, reading the Bible, and study together, the rest of the university would sneer at them when they would be seen walking at the university.
Yeah, so the Wesleyan movement, the Methodist movement, really starts as like a social club at a bunch of college people, and they called it the Holy Club. And yeah, like you said, they would get sneered at, and one of the nicknames they gave them was Methodist, which stuck because they had a very strict method to how they lived their Christian life. They also, one of the early nicknames they were called as well was Bible moths, because they were encouraged to read their Bible frequently. Imagine that.
In 1735, John and Charles Wesley together left England to go as missionaries to the native tribes in the Georgia colony. On the journey over, John Wesley was impressed by the heartfelt faith of a group of Moravian Christians who were on the voyage. One asked him if he had personally been saved by Christ, and in the moment, John was hesitant in his answer. This moment would return to his thoughts frequently in the years to come. For 2 years, the Wesleys attempted their evangelistic work among the natives before Charles left, disappointed from the complete failure to gain any converts.
Yeah, their mission to the natives in what is present-day Georgia in the United States was a complete and total disaster on every level. And I don't know if he's going to go into how disastrous it got in this video. If not, I will pause it and I'll tell you a little story.
John soon followed him back to England. On the voyage back, John questioned his own...
Okay, so he's not going to tell the story. So John, on the way over, falls in love with a girl named Sophie Hopke. She's like 17 or 18 years old, and John's quite a bit older than her, much more common at the time, right? But I think he's teaching her French or Latin or something like that. He's teaching her, and he falls in love with her. But he doesn't really get around to doing anything about it, right? He's an Anglican priest, so he can marry, but he doesn't really do anything about it. But then she gets promised to get married to the son of a powerful Mr. Oglethorpe, maybe one of the Georgia leaders. He may have been the governor, I can't remember. But she promises to get married to one of the Oglethorpes, which just sends Wesley into an emotional spiral. He does not take it very well. And it gets so bad that he denies her communion. Yeah, not good. And he kind of gets chased out of town. And he's forced to leave Georgia, and he gets chased out of town and boards a boat back to England on Christmas Eve.
His own faith. In his journal, he wrote, "I went to America to convert the Indians, but oh, who shall convert me?"
Very Wesley. I went to America to convert the Indians, but oh, who shall convert me? This is a hurting Wesley who knows he's made some mistakes, doubted his faith, made big mistakes in his faith, and says, who's going to convert me? Who's going to convert me? He was very self-reflective, which was part of one of his superpowers.
It is now 2 years and almost 4 months since I left my native country in order to teach the Georgian Indians the nature of Christianity. But what have I learned myself in the meantime? Why, what I the least of all suspected, that I, who went to America to convert others, was never myself converted to God.
So Wesley was really hard on himself because he felt like, yeah, I'm a priest and I believe in Jesus, but I've never had like this evangelical experience, right? I've never had this like evangelical conversion experience where I've really felt it truly. And so he struggled with that a lot. Now, I would never teach that somebody who's never had that experience is not a Christian, but to Wesley, it really made him insecure that he had never had one of those experiences.
England, Wesley sought out the Moravians, recalling the faith he had seen from them on his journey to Georgia. Yeah. He met Moravian missionary Peter Böhler, who convinced him that an extemporaneous prayer of faith was not incompatible with holding still to the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. Yep. And in May of 1738, Wesley experienced conversion, a moment of faith that was at the time a major emphasis of Moravian Christianity. In other occasions, both...
Yeah, so this is what we call the Aldersgate experience. I should know that. 1738, May 24th, 1738. We're close to the anniversary of it. And I'm pretty sure it's 1738. 1737, 1738. It's one of those years. Anyway, late 1730 sometime. And John Wesley writes in his diary, he said, I went most unwillingly. See, I remember this piece. I can't remember the day, but I can remember what he writes in his journal. He said, I at about 8:45, I went most unwillingly to a society at Aldersgate Street where the epistle to the Romans, the preface to the book of Romans was being read aloud. So he goes to Aldersgate Street to a society, a church gathering there, about 8:45 in May 1738, probably. You can check the date yourself. And they're reading Martin Luther's preface to the book of Romans. So Martin Luther wrote this long preface explaining the book of Romans, and they're reading that. And maybe it's 8:45 that he actually has the experience. Maybe that's what it is. I can't remember the details. Anyway, he has an experience in Aldersgate. We call it the Aldersgate experience at that society meeting. And he says, I felt my heart strangely warmed, and I felt that Christ did love me and had forgiven me. Right? So then he finds his evangelical conversion experience that he's been looking for the entire time. That's very important in Methodist history. We call it the Aldersgate experience. It's very central to our story. Very central to our story, and I can't remember the date and the time. And I know to some people, I probably got it right, but I know to some Methodists, they'd be like, how do you not know that? But it's like, well, sorry. In this moment, I can't think of it.
Whitefield and John's brother Charles, too, had this experience.
Yeah.
At Oxford, the Holy Club had been given, due to their methodical practice of Christianity, the title Methodists. And though the name was derogatory in intention, Wesley had embraced it. One of the Holy Club, George Whitefield, was at this time now preaching a lively Christianity throughout England. Whitefield was an Anglican cleric and had no intentions of participating in the forming of a new denomination, but the liturgical nature of the churches left no opportunity for Methodist fellowship and teaching within the church services. So separate societies
I'm going to let him finish here.
Were founded for these Bible studies and meetings of those in the movement of Methodism. Wesley, too, though not as skilled an orator as Whitefield, preached throughout the countryside. In 1739, the first Methodist chapel was built, not as a competitor to the local Anglican parish, but as a complement to it. Before long...
Yeah, so George Whitefield, he just talked about him, better speaker than Wesley. Wesley knew that. He was drawing these huge crowds preaching outside. And there's a moment where Wesley decides, I'm going to start preaching outside. And he says, I submitted, he wakes up and writes in his journal, today I submitted to be more vile. I submitted myself to be more vile, and I went out into the streets and I preached outside. And that's kind of how I felt starting a YouTube channel, right? I didn't want to get into the whole content creation thing and post the little thumbnails and stuff, but I thought I need to submit myself to be more vile to reach new people, right? Because a lot of people are on the internet, a lot of people are on YouTube, and that's part of the reason I do these videos. So let's keep going.
Wesley and Whitefield were preaching throughout America, and the evangelistic fervor and preaching of a one-time salvation experience produced such an influence across all denominations that it has come to be known as the First Great Awakening.
Yeah.
During Wesley's life, Methodism in England did not replace allegiance to the Anglican Church, but did produce a new brand of evangelical Anglicans that has remained even to the present. In the American colonies, things were different. Wesley's preaching split apart Congregational and Presbyterian churches, resistant to the new theology, and Methodist churches were started. With a shortage of Anglican priests to minister to these churches, Wesley, a strong proponent of frequent communion, decided to ordain ministers to administer the sacraments.
All right, this is the drastic action I was talking about. So I'm pretty fervent that you should... Oh, look, there's the little cross and flame. The Methodist symbol. Just make sure everybody sees that. That's pretty cool. I'm pretty fervent that you should not leave a denomination easily. You shouldn't just leave because you don't get your way, right? Wesley believed that as well, but he felt the Methodists in America were not getting the clerical support they needed from England because, surprise, 1776 had happened. 1776 to 1783 had happened. The American Revolution had been completed by this time. And there was a new nation, and everything that had to do with the Church of England and the king was very much under suspect by Americans. And so they're not getting all the clergy sent to them that they need. And so Wesley kind of feels that this is almost like they're being not excommunicated, but completely ignored. And so he takes it upon himself to ordain 2 clergy, which in the Church of England he did not have the authority to do. In their tradition, only bishops can ordain. Now, Wesley was a large proponent of this idea called presbyter apostolic succession, meaning to pass on apostolic succession, which is this idea that clergy are all ordained in an unbroken chain that goes all the way back to St. Peter. To pass that on, you don't have to be a bishop to lay hands on somebody and pass that on. You just have to be an elder, a presbyter, which is a New Testament office that I am, that John Wesley is, right? Most of the parish ministers in your local town who are like Reverend so-and-so, they're elders, they're presbyters, right? And Wesley felt that in the New Testament that presbyter and episcopos were the same office and they just used different words for them. So he was convinced that a bishop was not necessary to pass that on, and that's what I believe as well, and that's what most Methodists believe. And so he took it upon himself to ordain, I believe it's Thomas Coke, he ordains and sends to America to begin the work of the Methodists in America.
This went against the Anglican view of bishops holding the authority to ordain.
Yeah.
Shortly after Wesley's death, most who attended the Methodist chapel services in England had stopped attending the Anglican churches, and in 1795, as the Methodists morphed into a separate denomination, known Methodists were excluded by the Church of England, formalizing the split into 2 denominations. Is there any chance of these 2 groups reuniting? Today, Methodism is divided into many denominations, some under the title of Methodist and others called Wesleyan. Anglicanism, too, though mostly concentrated in denominations within the fold of the Anglican Communion, does have additional groups, such as the ACNA in the United States. So the idea of all these groups merging together is unlikely. However, in the United States, the largest Anglican body, the Episcopal Church, and the largest Methodist body, though it looks like they may be splitting themselves soon, the United Methodist Church, are working...
This was done before the schism, so he says the United Methodist Church, who may be splitting soon, we did have a schism since he made this video. We lost about 25% of our churches.
toward a full communion agreement, which allows the denominations to exchange clergy and means that the administration of the Eucharist and baptism of the other is recognized as valid.
Yeah, so this is a huge deal. I think this is great for church unity. The United Methodist Church is about to come into a full communion agreement with the Episcopal Church. Our General Conference in 2024 approved it, and now we're waiting on the Episcopalians to approve it, and then we will come back together with one of the pieces of the Church of England, and so we'll be back in communion with each other for the first time in 230 years or whatever it's been. I think it's a really positive thing for church unity. I'm excited about it.
Among other agreements. In May 9 of 2019, the UMC Council of Bishops unanimously voted to bring to the General Conference the question of full communion with the Episcopal Church. Later this year at the 2020 General Conference, it will go to a vote where, if approved, the Episcopal Church will then take up the question in July of 2021.
That got delayed because of the pandemic. So he's like, yeah, we're going to do it in 2020. It didn't happen because of the pandemic. It got delayed to our 2024 General Conference, but it has passed, and now we're waiting on the Episcopalians to pass it. It's very imminent now. This was made years ago. Oh. Was that it? Oh, that was like an abrupt ending. It will go
to a vote where, if approved, the Episcopal Church will then take up the question in July of 2021.
Oh, that was it. That was such an abrupt ending. Sorry. Very informational. I hope you enjoyed that. I think church unity is super important, and I am really looking forward to the full communion agreement coming together and being back in communion with our Episcopalian Church of England brothers and sisters here in America. Let me know what you think about church unity. If you're Episcopalian, let me know. If you're excited about it, if you're a Methodist, let me know if you've even heard of this and what you think about it in the comments. One of the best things you can do is subscribe to the channel and like the video if you liked the content. That's literally the best thing you can do for the channel. But until next time, I'm the Connectionalist. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.